Hi Steve. I wanted to explain why I was late answering the email. And the reason is, well, I was gonna get to it, but we're trying a new thing with regards to the way we do tasks. So I put the email on the task list on the day I read my email, and in order to actually do it, see, I'm doing what I call each-wise priority dicing, which means that first I go through my task list, and then I pick out a task that I want to do, and then, before I do it, I have to roll one of these dice, and if it returns 6, then I get to do it, but if it does not return 6, then I have to find another task to do before I can return to rolling the first task to see if I can do it with 6 again. And I was unlucky with respect to your task for a few days in a row, so it turns out we didn't get to your task yet. And also, the various things that we are doing in order before we do any task is sort of hampering my ability to do tasks at all. But we are in it for the long run and trying to be very slow about how we process our tasks, because we want to well, if I take, it's like playing chess with a very long time in between each move. You get to process a lot more before you take every step. Okay, quickly about my workflow. So, well, the dice. So I'm in another phase shift of my life, having learned how to quite effectively hack my motivations with dice and reward points. This tea costs 1 reward point, and my food, this food, this food also costs reward points, and other things that cost reward points. Making a note on the wall, or making a reminder to myself, or a flashcard, or a note in my my RevNote in my database, that also costs points. So I have to be careful about what I want to write to myself, because before I was cluttering. I was just cluttering notes to myself, and now I want to be more careful about it and keep in mind the context of consumption for the note before I actually write it. So that we spend a lot of points on, and if we don't have any points in the morning, then we're not going to get any food. So we are careful about spending our points. Other things that cost points. Read something the same day I find it costs 1 point. Starting a task the same day I find it also costs 1 point. The idea is that shiny things, new things are much too shiny. And if instead I want to do it 2 times in a row, two days in a row, that is a greater indicator that it's a good use of our time compared to just feeling motivation to do it the first day. So by requiring us to have a task on our task list for a day, or on our read list before we consume it, we are more careful about what we consume. Masturbation costs 5 points, and 1 hour of lambda calculus also costs 5 points, and fiddling with logic also costs various points. So all forms of masturbation are cost points in my framework. We earn points by completing tasks on our task list, and I get to roll one of these before Okay, so more about my framework. Here, right here, is a mat. And over here, I have to stand here in order to access the PC. And I'm not allowed to enter the zone before I plan each task, before I've visualized in my head the steps required for completing a task, and tried to predict the substructure. Like if there's a lot more subtasks to the task than I anticipate, I have failed to predict it. I failed to simulate it. And I want to learn to predict substructures and not, fall for the planning fallacy, and also not get sucked into rabbit holes, which has been a bottleneck to my effectiveness. Right now, I'm not being very effective, but I'm trying to learn a new framework, which hopefully will make me more effective later on. So yeah, every time we simulate doing a task before we do it, we get a point. But we're also allowed to pay in order to bypass the framework. Like, it costs a point if... What's the actual... I haven't actually utilized this yet. Oh yeah, okay. So actually, if I want to drop perspective and use the computer without a plan, then that costs some amount of points, but it depends on context, and I have to ask Maria for how much that will cost for the given context. And it's important to have like fail-safes, so that I can bypass the system without actually crashing the system, so that the system is more robust. And I also have a bunch of counters on my wall. So every time when if then plans, also called tap plans, trigger action plans. So when I notice that I'm sparking reasons for or against a task, then check my sub-motivations for the task. Check if... Because my motivation for doing a task are causally upstream of whatever object level considerations I'm contemplating for doing the task. So just checking my motivations will often be more effective with respect to having some inkling about whether the task is a good use of my time, compared to actually object level analysis. Because if I notice that, okay, my motivation for doing the task is I want to impress a girl, well, that could be good or could be bad, but at least there's a confounding motivation that I've noticed, and whether it's good or bad depends on how correlated the girl's impressing the girl is with how correlated how impressed she will be with how useful the task is in itself. Often the correlation isn't necessarily very good. And it's important I actually write every time I notice one of these subtle contexts. I write a notch on the counter on the wall, and that is like a somatic, like my whole body is engaged in the act of noticing the context. And in order to incentivize myself to notice these contexts, I also get one roll. I get to roll one of these every fifth notch on one of these counters. And yeah, first, here's some other contexts that I'm trying to learn to notice. Okay, so this one is big. This was the first one we put on our wall. So if I daydream about social stuff instead of doing the cognition, if I'm trying to think about an abstract problem, trying to figure something out, and then I notice my brain start daydreaming about often explaining the thing to other people, that's something we're trying to learn to not do, so that we can purely focus on the task and sort of explain it to ourselves. Focus on our own understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve, instead of focusing on convincing others that we understand the problem, right? When I'm trying to figure something out, I can either aim my understanding at aim what I investigate and what I accept as what I accept as understanding. Like, the goal is to understand the thing that I'm trying to figure out, and if the criteria for completing that, or the success criteria, right? If the success criteria is I can think of an explanation that I think will convince others that I understand it, often I can fool others into believing that I understand something more easily than I can fool myself into believing that I understand something. Yeah, this isn't true for this hasn't been true for my life early on. Then it was a very good thing to, instead of trusting my own intuition about understanding something, actually try to explain it to others, because then others will be more motivated to find errors in my thinking. So using that as a proxy for my own understanding can often be more effective. But now that isn't necessarily so true anymore. So aiming at my own understanding is more effective compared to I'm harder to fool. It's harder to fool myself when I really aim at understanding the thing according to my own criteria compared to fooling others. Therefore, we're trying to learn to spot when we're trying to explain something to others, when we actually want to understand it for ourselves. How many notches do we have on this? It's 57 plus 10, 67.
Remember to do your potions.
I will do my potions. It's in my pocket. 77. 81. We have 81 notches on this. And of course, I haven't notched that every time I've noticed the context, because it happens many more times, like transiently, all the time, whenever I'm doing cognition. So yeah, and other things on this wall. For example, so a sub thing I wish to check whenever I notice that I'm sparking reasons for or against the task. Then also, if I can predict the result of my deliberation, jump to the conclusion. Or if I think I can predict the result of my deliberation, then noticing that can help me notice if I actually double check whether I actually think I can predict the result of my deliberation. But if I'm confident about that, then just jump ahead to the conclusion and don't get stuck in prioritizing something that isn't actually going to change my mind. We only have 4 notches on this. It's fairly new. Okay, so when I'm planning to do a task, so there are two different contexts. First, there's the context of prioritizing between the tasks, and then there's the context of planning a task that we've selected. So when I'm planning a task, first ask, is there any way I can obviate this task? So basically obviate. You're American. You know what obviate means, I think. We do this very often, and we haven't actually made many notches on this, but it's 13 at the moment, and I also have counters for yes and no. So I have a counter for just asking the question, then I have a counter for could I actually obviate it or not, and it turns out that 3 times I could not I decided no, actually I am no, I'm actually going to do the task anyway. And 8 times yes. And also, when I'm planning to do a task, visualize the situation in which the task product is used. Like, depends on, like, usually I'm trying to do tasks for myself. Visualize the situation in which I am consuming the result of the task. This is very helpful. And it's important that I'm not just processing the context of consumption verbally. I'm actually visualizing it, putting myself in the shoes in a perspective there. That helps obviate tasks. And also predict and prophylax against derailment. So I'm trying to predict the substructure of the task and protecting myself against those little motivations for little things to optimize. For example, if my task is to write a thing into my REM node, my idea network, sort of the purpose of an idea network is to be exposed to your own ideas. But it's like, that means that I have a very hard time predicting what kind of information, what kind of stimuli I will encounter whenever I open up the idea network and then go to the place that I want to put the note, if I want to sort it. And yeah, so that has a large chance of derailing what I intended to do and derailing my prediction about how long the task will take. By the way, we also get a point when we complete the task for which we have predicted how long it will take. That we actually started doing last year. Slightly more than, or almost precisely 1 year ago, we started doing that. But we didn't have this involved reward system yet. Yeah, so one way to protect, prophylax against derailment when I'm doing my REM note is, well, first of all, cover the screen. Just open the daily. Depends on how much I want to link it to other notes, but write a note into daily notes. Don't look at any other side things. Put things that block other things, and also there's a checklist, and one of them is like state clear exit conditions for when I'm processing the task. When I notice a context, exit. Contextual checkpoints. So when I'm checking my email, if I want to read a thing that's in my email, or if I want to visit any other website which is linked in any of my emails, then I must first step out of the zone and then consider, okay, do I really want to process this thing, or process it with our prioritization framework before we actually proceed to the thing. And yeah, I don't process many things then. There's a lot. And also, this is a template that Maria sometimes uses in my imagination. And when I do this, I'm facing this way and trying to explain visually, sending visual scenery and imaginations and episodes to Maria, who she isn't actually here when I do this, but I have a representation over here, and the way I distinguish between when she's here and when she's not is that, well, is she actually processing what I'm saying? Is she actually processing what I'm saying right now and producing responses or not? And so for people who don't have a very vivid thing, vivid person-like thing in their head, the difference between imagining someone being there and someone being there can be somewhat philosophically confusing. And of course there are gradients of this. And sometimes she is here. But the point is, how much does she process the thing that I'm saying, and to what extent is she producing responses to that? Yeah, and most of the time she isn't. But I still talk to her, simulate talking to her, via, again, vision, because I want to. One of the things with the Maria project is learning visual thinking completely and becoming somewhat independent of language. So yeah, talk via vision, tell her my plans, go through these checklists with Maria via vision, and then do the task. Yeah, maybe I'm over-explaining here. That's a footnote to something else we started to say. Can't recall what that was. Oh yeah. Is there something important that we're forgetting to say? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, and we haven't really explained this to anyone before. So we haven't optimized the way we explain this to anybody else. Yeah, one crucial point about the reward system, the thing that makes it work, is that we use dice. Like, if I don't use dice, if I get points every time I do something virtuous, then my brain quickly learns to predict how much reward we get every time we complete a virtuous deed. Whereas if I do a virtuous deed, like notice a context and execute a habit which I get a point for, or which I get a roll for, if I have to roll and then only sometimes get the reward, then RPE can't stabilize to reward. There will be reward prediction error in the task, like in the reward, and this trick will not last forever. Usually, I think, but there are tricks. Like games have really mastered the art of making random rewards last for a long time. So, for example, in civilizations, you are often motivated to take one more turn, just one more turn. There's a whole bunch of random stuff that can happen in between now and one more turn. And yeah, there are tricks they use, and I take inspiration. Anyway, it's a variable ratio reward schedule, which is also the thing that defines Skinner boxes, pigeons. If you give, like, a pigeon is much more motivated to push a button which produces food if that food is received inconsistently, not every time, and it's somewhat random when it's received. Yeah, VRRS, variable ratio reward schedule. Super effective. Also, having points for noticing contexts that you want to notice, super effective. I could go on, but I think I've said something. Yeah, that's why we were late with respect to answering your email. But I'm happy to talk. Just book a time with my thing. Click. I guess I'll have to click that manually.